My girlfriend doesn't like it because she says I have a temper. She's like, it's just not that you're trying to fix things. It's that you get frustrated, you punch the wall, the dog starts shaking. I just don't think it's a good idea. You're a comedian. You should tell jokes. He's a plumber. He should plumb, right? Trying to explain to her that losing your shit is part of the process of fixing something. Everybody does that. You buy, right? Yeah. You buy something at IKEA. You get halfway through putting it together. You're like, dude, where the fuck is the fucking... Oh, there it is. There it is. There it is. Well, honey, I didn't see it. I didn't see it. Why? You want to put it together? Well, then you put it together. You put together this fucking particle board piece of fucking shit. Its instructions make no sense. I will buy another one. I will buy another one. I'll buy fucking 5 and smash 4 if I want to. You tell me what to do. Oh, go to your mother's. I don't give a shit. Jesus Christ. What story are you going to tell? This one, right? Not the part about how I pay all the fucking bills, right?
Good morning. It's Friday, Police Craft Friday, December the 29th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have military shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, police craft, all that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I shouldn't change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
I gained 17 days. That's just nothing. There's nothing you can teach me.
Thank you. And now, the military shorts.
December 1941, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, General George S. Patton took command of the 1st and 2nd Armored Divisions. His philosophy of battle: we shall attack and attack until we are exhausted, and then we shall attack again. He earned the moniker Old Blood and Guts. Patton's tactics led to the first major American victory in North Africa. In early 1945, Patton's army crossed the Rhine River and into Germany, capturing 10,000 miles of territory and helping to liberate the country from Nazi rule. His controversial critique of the Allies' denazification policies led to his removal from command. In a tragic twist of fate, Patton succumbed to injuries from an automobile accident in December 1945. His legacy, however, lives on as a testament to unyielding tenacity and military brilliance.
He was serving as an intelligence staff officer on the morning of January 24, 1945, near Husson, France, when German formations converged on their position. His name was Lieutenant Garland Connor, and he had been fighting since February of 1942, when the first American forces landed in North Africa. With his battalion at risk of being overrun, Connor volunteered to run straight into the enemy assault in order to get to a position from which he could direct friendly artillery on the advancing German army. He zigged and zagged for 400 yards through an enemy onslaught that destroyed everything in its path. For 3 hours, he single-handedly held off the German onslaught. With German forces just 5 yards away, he ordered artillery on his own position to stop them. "Kill me with them if you have to," he barked to his commanders. He lived to be 79 years old, and in 2017 posthumously received the Medal of Honor. He joined the Army Air Corps as a mechanic, but with his 2010 eyesight and calm demeanor, he quickly earned a reputation as a skilled pilot. His name was Charles Elwood Chuck Yeager, and on October 12, 1944, flying his P-51 Mustang, Yeager managed to destroy 5 Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighters in a single engagement. Less than a month later, the now Captain Yeager downed a brand new German Me-262, the first of 5 victories against the German jet fighter. By the end of World War II, he had flown 64 combat missions, destroying 12 German aircraft. After the war, Yeager was selected to be a test pilot for the Air Force's new jet fighters, and on October 17, 1947, Yeager became the first person to break the sound barrier in level flight. Yeager returned to combat flying and logged more than 100 flights over Vietnam. Chuck Yeager passed away on December 7, 2020, at the age of 97. He heard a voice call out his name. "Joe, it's me, Bobby." The Joe was Joseph Kenneth Dixon, a corporal in the 81st Airborne Anti-Aircraft Battalion. The Bobby was PFC Robert Kane of the 9th Infantry Division. It was a moonless, cloudless night in January of 1944, and the childhood best friends had run into each other while waiting in line for fish and chips in Oxford, England. Inseparable since birth, the two hadn't seen or heard from each other in over 3 years. Brutal combat in North Africa and Sicily had hollowed out Bobby Kane to the point where he was barely recognizable to Dixon. "I'm not going to make it," Kane whispered to Dixon through a cracking voice. "I'll get to Germany close to the end, but that's as far as I'll go," he said with a ghostly premonition. Robert Kane would be killed on March 9, 1945, at the Battle of Remagen, while defending the Ludendorff Bridge from a German counteroffensive.
In the throes of the Korean War, Captain William Earl Barber and his battle-weary Marines held a vital 3-mile mountain pass. Night fell and they dug in, setting up a defense on the frozen, snow-covered hillside. When a force of estimated regimental strength savagely attacked during the night, Barber stood fast, assuring he could hold if supplied by airdrops. He chose to risk his own command rather than sacrifice his trapped Marines or abandon his wounded. Although severely wounded in the leg, Captain Barber continued to maintain personal control, often moving up and down the lines on a stretcher to direct the defense. For 5 days and 6 nights, they repelled repeated onslaughts, accounting for an estimated 1,000 enemy casualties. When relief came, a mere 82 of his original 220 Marines could walk away from their valiant stand. Captain William Earl Barber, this is his Medal of Honor story.
He was a radio operator on a B-29 Superfortress, but his secondary job was to drop white phosphorus charges to signal the target to the other bombers. It was February 1945, and as they approached the chemical plant at Koriyama, something went horribly wrong. His name was Henry "Red" Irwin, and the 1,300-degree phosphorus charge jammed and blew back in his face, blinding him and burning his nose off. Smoke instantly enveloped the plane. The heat would soon melt through the panels. In agony, Irwin cradled the scalding hot charge like a football and made a dash for the cockpit window, heaving it out and saving the crew from certain death. "Is everyone else all right?" was all he said as he slipped in and out of consciousness. Thanks to General Curtis LeMay, the Medal of Honor was presented to Red within a week of his near-fatal injuries. Shortly before passing away in 2002, Red Irwin showed his grandson the medal, whispering, "Freedom isn't free," while holding back tears. It was supposed to be an ordinary milk run, with little flak or German fighter coverage expected. It was the 5th mission for the Lucky Lady, a B-17 piloted by Ken Tuck Belton, a 22-year-old second lieutenant in the 452 Bomb Group based in Diafam Green, England. Just a day earlier, Tuck and his best friend, another B-17 pilot, had drinks at the officers' club. Tuck's friend shared a tip he had picked up from a seasoned pilot. Even though the chest parachutes are too bulky to wear, there's a way to rig it so that it's attached in case you get blown out of the plane. The next day, Lucky Lady ran into heavy flak and took a direct hit. Tuck Belton awoke 10,000 feet in the air with a parachute dangling from his side, just the way he had discussed with his best friend. He was the only one to survive the explosion. 45 years later, he revisited the spot to thank the Dutch underground and pay respects to his fallen crew. Sometimes it takes the horror of war to bring out the best of humanity, unexpected acts of mercy from the unlikeliest of places. It was December 20th, 1943, and Lieutenant Charles Brown's B-17 bomber named Ye Old Pub was crippled and struggling to make it out of German airspace following a bombing mission over Bremen. German fighters scrambled as the listing bomber fell further and further out of formation. The first to reach it was German ace Franz Stiegler, who pulled up to the defenseless bomber and saw the terrified and wounded crew. Miraculously, instead of squeezing off a round of gunfire, Stigler escorted the plane out of German airspace, even shielding it from other fighters. Brown made it home and served out the rest of the war, never mentioning the incident. Stigler did the same. In 1990, the two actually met and became best of friends. They died within months of each other in 2008. He enlisted in the newly formed Army Air Force shortly after his 18th birthday. He became a wing gunner for the 381st Bombardment Group, flying a B-17 bomber. His name was Francis Owens, but everyone called him Bud. It was July 4th, 1943, and their B-17 was crippled en route to the target in France. "Evacuate," yelled the pilot. Seeing the radio operator badly wounded, Bud Owens tended to his wound, gave him his parachute, ejected him from the plane, and pulled the cord. The wounded man survived the war. As for Bud, he found an extra chute and jumped. The French resistance orchestrated an escape through the Pyrenees Mountains to Spain so he could rejoin his group. The arduous journey through the cold mountains was too much for the weakened Bud, and he died there. In 1951, his remains were identified. Bud Owens is buried at the Ardennes American Cemetery in Belgium. He enlisted in the Marine Corps shortly after his 18th birthday against the wishes of his father, who had fought in World War I. He would participate in a staggering 21 amphibious assaults in the Pacific theater of World War II as a scout sniper with the 4th Marine Division. His name was Lee Marvin, and the world would come to know him for playing hard-boiled, tough guy characters in dozens of movies and television programs. On June 18, 1944, while taking part in the assault on Mount Tapachau during the brutal Battle of Saipan, Marvin was hit twice by Japanese machine gun fire, severing his sciatic nerve. His entire platoon was wiped out that day, except for one other Marine, a buddy who saved Marvin's life. He would spend the next 13 months in a naval hospital learning to walk again. Lee Marvin is buried at Arlington National Cemetery next to the tomb of the unknown soldier. His reported final words were, "Once a Marine, always a Marine."
And that was the military shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, the funny thing is, if you're trying to stop drinking, you need something better than alcohol. And alcohol's pretty good.
Yeah.
So you better find something a lot better, man. Yeah, and it is. And then estimable people do estimable things. It's like, yeah, well, you want to figure out something that you're doing with your life that's worth not getting drunk and screwing up.
Yeah.
Part of the reason people drink alcohol is to get rid of their responsibility. I mean, that's, you know, you hear people drink because they have problems. It's like, yeah, no. Some people drink because they're anxious, and alcoholics drink because they're in withdrawal. But young people drink because they're sick and tired of being responsible, because it's annoying. It's like, so I'll drink enough, I won't care about the medium to long-term consequences, because alcohol, that's exactly what alcohol does. It doesn't make you ignorant of the medium to long-term consequences, but it makes you not care about them. You know, you might say, well, why do people drink too much? It's like, if you like alcohol, that's a stupid question. Right? It's like, why do people drink too much? Well, because it's great.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, so why stop? Well, you do stupid things when you're drunk. You hurt yourself. You compromise your health. It's really hard on the people around you. You tend to turn into a liar, and it screws up your life.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but it's pretty fun. Yeah, well, it is. But you need something better than that. And what's better isn't being straight and not making mistakes. It's like, that's all prohibition in some sense. What's better is, no, you need an adventure, man. You need to get out there and have something to do.
Yeah.
And something worth waking up for. And that's the substitute for the addiction. Actually, the addiction is the substitute for that, if truth be known. If you are an effective writer and speaker and communicator, you have all the authority and competence that there is. The best thing you can do is read and write every day. Couple of hours every day. Write about things you find important, and see if you can discover what you believe to be true. And that'll build you a foundation. And it's unbelievably practical. Like if you look at people who are phenomenally successful across life, there's various reasons, but one of them is that they're unbelievably good at articulating what they're aiming at and strategizing and negotiating and enticing people with a vision forward. It's like, get your words together, man. That makes you unstoppable. Get your words together. Make yourself an articulate creature, and then you're deadly in the best possible way. Read great books. Really, man. And you've got these unbelievable libraries that are full of the writings of people who are intelligent and articulate beyond comprehension. And, you know, and you can go there and you can learn all this. And you might think, well, why should you learn it? There's nothing more powerful than someone who is articulate and who can think and speak. It's power. And I mean power of the best sort. It's authority and influence and respectability and competence. And your highest skill is to be found in articulated speech. And if you're a master at formulating your arguments, you win everything. And better than that, when you win everything, everyone around you wins too. Because to transform yourself into, let's consider your transformation into something approximating the logos. It means you shine a light on the whole world. Well, there's nothing more exciting to do than that. There's nothing better you can possibly do. You transform yourself into something that's articulated and sensible and grounded in history and knowledgeable and wise, man. You can do anything you want, and hopefully anything you want for good. Because if you have any sense, everything you want to do would be for the good, because there's nothing more compelling or meaningful or useful in combating the tragedy of life than to struggle with all your soul on behalf of the good. You know, I've really seen the benefits, for example, for weightlifting, because I've watched people, because I'm 58, how old am I? 56. I've really noticed the difference between people and when they age, between people who laid down a good physiological platform when they were young and those who didn't. Because if you haven't worked out weights, particularly, I would say, you start to get pretty soft in your 30s and your cardiovascular system starts to go, and really early. The other thing, too, is the best thing you can do to maintain cognitive ability isn't to do exercises like lumosity. It's not brain exercises that keep you sharp. It's exercise. So if you're 50, both cardiovascular and weightlifting, if you're 50, you can restore your cognitive function to the level of a 30-year-old through exercise.
Through physical activity.
Yeah, well, your brain is a very demanding organ. And if your cardiovascular system is compromised, then you get stupid. And so, yeah, it's really...
So the less you move and the bigger you get, the more stupid you become.
Yeah, well, because
you
compromise its function. Because the brain is... It's the organ that uses more... It's very metabolically demanding. And so if you're not in good physical shape, then one of the things that suffers most greatly is your cognitive function. No one can live without a routine. You just forget that. If you guys don't have a routine, I would recommend, you get one going, because you cannot be mentally healthy without a routine. You need to pick a time to get up. Whatever time you want, but pick one and stick to it, because otherwise you dysregulate your circadian rhythms and they regulate your mood. I've told people to learn to use a schedule. And people often hate schedules because they act as their own tyrants, right? They say, well, you have to do this unpleasant thing, and then here's another unpleasant thing you have to do, and then you have to do this unpleasant thing. And you do that for about 3 days, and you think, to hell with this, I'm not doing that, and you fall off the wagon. That isn't what you're supposed to do with a schedule. You're supposed to use it to design the days that you would like to have if you were taking care of yourself. You wake up in the morning and you think, here's 5 things I have to do that if I don't do, my life will be worse. It's like paying bills, for example, or taking out the garbage. It's like you have to do those because otherwise things degenerate. So you got to put some of those in the schedule, because otherwise tomorrow is worse than today, and that's a bad trajectory. But you also want to build in things, you got to act in some sense like you're dealing with a relatively recalcitrant 9-year-old. It's like, here's some things you have to do, but here's some things that if you do, you could reward yourself with. And if you get the balance there between obligation and reward right, then you'll find that you're motivated to do the things. And that's what you want to do. You want to do that so it's sustainable across days and weeks and months. And so you got to treat yourself like a good boss would treat a valued employee and not like a tyrant would treat a slave. Make friends with a calendar, like Google Calendar or something like that. And I can tell you some tricks about that because really it is important. And I'm not kidding around about this. So here's one way of thinking about making use of a schedule. Often people are afraid of schedules because they think of them as a trap. You make a schedule and that's like this little prison that you have to live inside. And all you're doing in your schedule is putting down things you have to do or should do. And so, there's not a lot of fun in that. And so not only is it a trap or a prison, but it's kind of an unpleasant one. But a way to work with the schedule in a lot more sophisticated way is to think, well, I'm going to plan the next week, say, because you plan it day by day, but we'll take the week as the unit level of analysis and think, I'd like to plan a week I'd like to have. And then your schedule all of a sudden becomes a tool for increasing the quality of your life. And that's a whole different issue.
And that was Jordan Peterson. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the 33 strategies of war.
But Lincoln soon found his teammate in General Ulysses S. Grant, who shared his belief in offensive warfare and who did not have an oversized ego. Once Lincoln discovered Grant, he latched onto him, put him in command, and let him run the war as he saw fit. Be careful in assembling this team that you are not seduced by expertise and intelligence. Character, the ability to work under you and with the rest of the team, and the capacity to accept responsibility and think independently are equally key. That is why Marshall tested Eisenhower for so long. You may not have as much time to spare, but never choose a man merely by his glittering resume. Look beyond his skills to his psychological makeup. Rely on the team you have assembled, but do not be its prisoner or give it undue influence. Franklin D. Roosevelt had his infamous brain trust, the advisors and cabinet members on whom he depended for their ideas and opinions, but he never let them in on the actual decision-making, and he kept them from building up their own power base within the administration. He saw them simply as tools, extending his own abilities and saving invaluable time. He understood unity of command and was never seduced into violating it. A key function of any chain of command is to supply information rapidly from the trenches, letting you adapt fast to circumstances. The shorter and more streamlined the chain of command, the better for the flow of information. Even so, information is often diluted as it passes up the chain. The telling details that reveal so much become standardized and general as they are filtered through formal channels. Some on the chain, too, will interpret the information for you, filtering what you hear. To get more direct knowledge, you must occasionally want to visit the field yourself. Marshall would sometimes drop in on an army base incognito to see with his own eyes how his reforms were taking effect. He would also read letters from soldiers. But in these days of increasing complexity, this can consume far too much of your time. What you need is what the military historian Martin van Creveld calls a directed telescope. People in various parts of the chain and elsewhere to give you instant information from the battlefield. These people, an informal network of friends, allies, and spies, let you bypass the slow-moving chain. The master of this game was Napoleon, who created a kind of shadow brigade of younger officers in all areas of the military, men chosen for their loyalty, energy, and intelligence. At a moment's notice, he would send one of these men to a far-off front or garrison, or even to enemy headquarters, ostensibly as a diplomatic envoy, with secret instructions to gather the kind of information he could not get fast enough through normal channels. In general, it is important to cultivate these directed telescopes and plant them throughout the group. They give you flexibility in the chain, room to maneuver in a generally rigid environment. The single greatest risk to your chain of command comes from the political animals in the group. People like this are inescapable. They spring up like weeds in any organization. Not only are they out for themselves, but they build factions to further their own agendas and fracture the cohesion you have built. Interpreting your commands for their own purposes, finding loopholes in any ambiguity, they create invisible breaks in the chain. Try to weed them out before they arrive. In hiring your team, look at the candidates' histories. Are they restless? Do they often move from place to place? That is a sign of the kind of ambition that will keep them from fitting in. When people seem to share your ideas exactly, be wary. They are probably mirroring them to charm you. The court of Queen Elizabeth I of England was full of political types. Elizabeth's solution was to keep her opinions quiet. On any issue, no one outside her inner circle knew where she stood. That made it hard for people to mirror her, to disguise their intentions behind a front of perfect agreement. Hers was a wise strategy. Another solution is to isolate the political moles, to give them no room to maneuver within the organization. Marshall accomplished this by infusing the group with his spirit of efficiency. Disruptors of that spirit stood out and could quickly be isolated. In any event, do not be naive. Once you identify the moles in the group, you must act fast to stop them from building a power base from which to destroy your authority. Finally, pay attention to the orders themselves, their form as well as their substance. Vague orders are worthless. As they pass from person to person, they are hopelessly altered, and your staff comes to see them as symbolizing uncertainty and indecision. It is critical that you yourself be clear about what you want before issuing your orders. On the other hand, if your commands are too specific and too narrow, you will encourage people to behave like automatons and stop thinking for themselves, which they must do when the situation requires it. Erring in neither direction is an art. Here, as in so much else, Napoleon was the master. His orders were full of juicy details, which gave his officers a feel for how his mind worked, while also allowing them interpretive leeway. He would often spell out possible contingencies, suggesting ways the officers could adapt his instructions if necessary. Most important, he made his orders inspiring. His language communicated the spirit of his desires. A beautifully worded order has extra power. Instead of feeling like a minion, there only to execute the wishes of a distant emperor, the recipient becomes a participant in a great cause. Bland, bureaucratic orders filter down into listless activity and imprecise execution. Clear, concise, inspiring orders make officers feel in control and fill troops with fighting spirit. Reversal. No good can ever come of divided leadership. If you are ever offered a position in which you will have to share command, turn it down, or the enterprise will fail and you will be held responsible. Better to take a lower position and let the other person have the job. It is always wise, however, to take advantage of your opponent's faulty command structure. Never be intimidated by an alliance of forces against you. If they share leadership, if they are ruled by committee, your advantage is more than enough. In fact, do as Napoleon did and seek out enemies with that kind of command structure. You cannot fail to win. Here are some further reflections on the strategy of command and control. From On War by Karl von Clausewitz. How very different is cohesion between that of an army rallying around one flag carried into battle at the personal command of one general, and that of an allied military force extending 50 or 100 leagues or even on different sides of the theater. In the first case, cohesion is at its strongest and unity at its closest. In the second case, the unity is very remote, often consisting of no more than a shared political intention, and therefore only scanty and imperfect, while the cohesion of the parts is mostly weak and often no more than an illusion. By Napoleon Bonaparte. In war, it is not men, but the man that counts. From Lone Star Preacher, by Colonel John W. Thomason, Jr. An army is like a horse, in that it reflects the temper and the spirit of its rider. If there is an uneasiness and an uncertainty, it transmits itself through the reins, and the horse feels uneasy and uncertain. By Baron Antoine-Henri de Jomini. What must be the result of an operation which is but partially understood by the commander, since it is not his own conception? I have undergone a pitiable experience as prompter at headquarters, and no one has a better appreciation of the value of such services than myself. And it is particularly in a council of war that such a part is absurd. The greater the number and the higher the rank of the military officers who compose the council, the more difficult will it be to accomplish the triumph of truth and reason, however small be the amount of dissent. What would have been the action of a council of war to which Napoleon proposed the movement of Arcola, the crossing of the St. Bernard, the maneuver at Ulm, or that at Gera and Jena? The timid would have regarded them as rash, even to madness. Others would have seen 1,000 difficulties of execution, and all would have concurred in rejecting them. And if, on the contrary, they had been adopted, and had been executed by anyone but Napoleon, would they not certainly have proved failures? From the Iliad, by Homer. Do you think every Greek here can be a king? It's no good having a carload of commanders. We need one commander, one king, the one to whom Zeus, son of Cronus, the crooked, has given the staff and the right to make decisions for his people. And so Odysseus mastered the army. The men all streamed back from their ships and huts and assembled with a roar. From Command in War, by Martin van Creveld. Reports gathered and presented by the General Staff on the one hand, and by the Statistical Bureau on the other, thus constituted the most important sources of information at Napoleon's disposal. Climbing through the chain of command, however, such reports tend to become less and less specific. The more numerous the stages through which they pass, and the more standardized the form in which they are presented, the greater the danger that they will become so heavily profiled, and possibly sugar-coated or merely distorted by the many summaries, as to become almost meaningless. To guard against this danger, and to keep subordinates on their toes, a commander needs to have, in addition, a kind of directed telescope. The metaphor is an apt one, which he can direct at will at any part of the enemy's forces, the terrain, or his own army, in order to bring in information that is not only less structured than that passed on by the normal channels, but also tailored to meet his momentary and specific needs. Ideally, the regular reporting system should tell the commander which questions to ask, and the directed telescope should enable him to answer those questions. It was the two systems together, cutting across each other and wielded by Napoleon's masterful hand, which made the revolution in command possible. And lastly, Napoleon's written instructions to Field General, quoted in Command in War, by Martin van Creveld. Tomorrow at dawn you depart from St. Cloud and travel to Worms. Cross the Rhine there, and make sure that all preparations for the crossing of the river by my guard are being made there. You will then proceed to Kassel, and make sure that the place is being put in a state of defense and provisioned. Taking due security precautions, you will visit the fortress of Hanau. Can it be secured by a coup de main? If necessary, you will visit the citadel of Marburg, too. You will then travel on to Kassel, and report to me by way of my charge d'affaires at that place, making sure that he is in fact there. The voyage from Frankfurt to Kassel is not to take place by night, for you are to observe anything that might interest me. From Kassel, you are to travel, also by day, by the shortest way to Köln. The land between Wesel, Minsk, Kassel, and Köln is to be reconnoitered. What roads and good communications exist there? Gather information about communications between Kassel and Paderborn. What is the significance of Kassel? Is the place armed and capable of resistance? Evaluate the forces of the Prince Elector in regard to their present state, their artillery, militia, strong places. From Köln, you will travel to meet me at Minsk. You are to keep to the right bank on the Rhine and submit a short appreciation of the country around Dusseldorf, Wesel, and Kassel. I shall be at Minsk on the 29th in order to receive your report. You can see for yourself how important it is for the beginning of the campaign and its progress that you should have the country well imprinted on your memory.
And that was the end of Chapter 5, Avoid the Snares of Groupthink, from the 33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now from Things Christians Don't Know.
Why did Jesus write with his finger in the sand? I had never heard this before. Watch this. The Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They said, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. What do you say? But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. Paul in 1 Corinthians 10 tells us that Jesus was with these same Israelites that Moses was with. Jesus was the water coming out of the rock. Jesus was the manna, the bread of heaven. So with these same Israelites at that time, could it be that it was Jesus himself who gave Moses the law? Exodus 31:18. When the Lord finished speaking with Moses on Mount Sinai, he gave him the 2 tablets of covenant law inscribed by the finger of God. The law, including the laws about adultery. The Pharisees were trying to trap Jesus in his interpretation of the law, but Jesus could have been responding saying, I'm the one who wrote the law.
And that was Things That Christians Don't Know. Back in a minute.
The mob, Michael, were people known to be backstabbers or people known his word is good? If he said that, if Junior said that, or this guy said that, or the Chin said it, his word is good. Did anybody have a good word?
Yes, I relied on people's words, and I didn't pay a bad price for it. People that gave their word to me most of the time, people on the top, they kept their word. They did. I found out something in that life, Chaz. Guys that were ready to pull the trigger quick, they didn't last. All those guys that had that kind of reputation, when it came their time, they were in trouble. Because, you know, even guys that were legitimate tough guys, I mean, these were scary guys. These were guys who would put a bullet in your head as soon as look at you.
Like DeMayo and guys like that?
Yeah, well, what happens? You don't want these guys around. You don't want guys around that are cowboys and that you can't trust and you don't know what they're going to do, so you eliminate them. Every one of those guys that had that kind of reputation, they're all gone. You get rid of them.
And that was Michael Franzese. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Policecraft.
You do this even knowing that it was the kind of case unlikely to be charged by the DA, even if an arrest was made, for Rico would be a train wreck on the witness stand and probably wouldn't show up in court at all if he had something better going, like Margarita Mondays. So you spend a wealth of time, energy, and resources on a case going nowhere. You deal with these types of victims by picking their stories apart, asking them legitimate, credibility-testing questions. Tell me again why you were in an alley at 2 a.m. wearing no pants with a girl you know only as Peaches, that sometimes make them so frustrated that they curse and storm away. That's fine by you because, as the saying goes, no victim, no crime. You are required to investigate felony complaints, but if the sketchy victim walks away from you, you aren't required to jog at their side, notepad in hand, and beg them to reconsider. When I think about questionable victims, I recall the day when a description came over the police radio of a car taken in an armed robbery. It was a Chevy Monte Carlo with 20-inch custom rims. Etched on the side of the Chevy, the dispatcher told us, was, "20s, bitch." My partner and I burst out laughing. No one deserves to be carjacked, but some you don't feel as bad for as others. Auto burglars are out there in every town in America plying their trade. The other day, I saw a sign on a car in the SF Mission District that read, "Please don't break my windows. No valuables left in car. Thanks." But breaking a car window is a bit harder than you think. A chip of porcelain from spark plugs, otherwise known as a ninja rock, works best, and some car burglars will keep that chip tied to a string for easy retention. The bold thief will break the target window, reach in, grab what they can, and go, all in a matter of seconds. Others stretch the crime out. They'll break the glass and then walk away and see if anyone notices. If the cops arrest them at that point, it's just for misdemeanor vandalism, not felony auto burglary. But if the coast is clear, they'll move in and load up, and if they're caught then, they'll claim, "Hey, I didn't break into that car. The window was already like that. I've heard there's been a rash of broken windows around here." Even though an auto burglar will break into your car solely for the 6 cents he sees in your center console, because that's 6 cents he didn't have before, oh, what a haul he might encounter when he digs a little deeper. I constantly review police reports where thousands of dollars of luggage are taken. High-end jewelry, expensive cameras, laptops, passports, firearms, all items left by people who thought a rolled-up window or locked trunk was some kind of magical barrier against theft. If the thief decides to take not only what's in the car, but the car itself, here are some of the ways he'll do it. Get a shaved-down key and turn it in the ignition just like the real key. This works best on older Hondas and Toyotas. Peel the steering column and disable the steering lock with a screwdriver. Glove up and cut the power wires, which are usually red, underneath the steering column. Strip the ends and touch them together briefly. Then separate them and tie them off. This turns on the juice to the car. Repeat this process with the starter wires, which are usually brown. This will start the engine. If you don't tie off the wires, they can deliver a nasty shock. Now you may ask yourself, why is this cop giving people tips on how to commit vehicular felonies? What if a criminal picks this up? Well, for one, I found that most street criminals aren't so into books. But more importantly, I'm not giving away any trade secrets here. Most criminals know this information already, and if they don't, it is readily available online. And I'm not talking about some obscure encrypted site on the dark web. Nope, it's on YouTube. You will have at least one street criminal nemesis on the job. I have several, but the one I'm going to talk about is Devin, not his real name, a prolific burglar and sometime crack dealer. He is my nemesis not because he's the worst of the lot, although he's no saint. No, he's my nemesis because he keeps getting away from me. My first encounter with Devin came one fine spring day when I was rolling around in an unmarked car with a few co-workers, and I saw him at a bus stop. I recognized him from a wanted flyer. "Hey, is that Devin?" I asked, and got out of the car. Devin answered my question by sprinting away. He disappeared around the corner, and I ran after him. Poof, he was gone, leaving me trying to catch my breath as I checked around on the ground to make sure I hadn't coughed up my own spleen. My second go-around with Devin was in the lobby of an apartment building, maybe 6 months later. My partner and I had just cleared a weapons call, so my shotgun was slung over my shoulder. I saw a guy standing by the front desk. "Hey, is that Devin?" It had been a while, and I knew him mostly by seeing the back of his head and the soles of his tennis shoes. I called my partner over and took hold of Devin, but when he calmly said he was someone else, I paused for just a tick when I took the cuffs out, a pure rookie mistake. He capitalized on my hesitation and once again bolted. I still had my hands on him, but it didn't matter. He dragged me across the lobby. All 250 pounds of me, 235 with duty belt and long gun. He pulled me along with a surge of horsepower that belied his unassuming frame. The strap of the shotgun got tangled up between us, and I tripped over it and him and went sailing into the lobby wall, hitting it full bore, the impact putting my blocky Midwestern head right through the drywall. When the cobwebs cleared, I heard my partner outside on the radio giving chase. Again, it didn't matter, as Devon once more vanished into the night. I was left with three things: handcuffs with no hands in them, a piercing headache, and a lengthy incident report I had to write explaining the property damage I had caused with my own face. 0 for 2. Outwitted, outclassed, outplayed. I took a photo of the face crater in the wall, documented proof of my futility, and for a time looked at it whenever I felt myself getting cocky. I found comfort in the words of writer M.H. Anderson, who said, "If at first you don't succeed, you're running about average." Sometime later, sharp-eyed cops in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco arrested Devon for selling crack. I believe it's for the best that someone else besides me got him. Given my track record, my encore probably would have been chasing Devon into a waste treatment plant and stumbling into a vat of raw sewage. Then this conversation would follow among my co-workers. "Where's Plantinga? Oh, you didn't hear? He went after Devon a third time, tripped, and drowned in human waste." "Huh, how about that? So can I have his desk?" One of your favorite types of street criminals is the fugitive who will spray paint his face while on the run. He must think it will provide sufficient camouflage so he can blend in with his surroundings. Or if the police stop him, he can say, "Officer, you seem to be looking for a light-skinned individual, but here I am, clearly dark-skinned. My flesh is just runny. I have a condition." Some of these face painters are, as you might suspect, really drunk. Another police favorite is the fleeing suspect who will actually call 911 and demand the police stop chasing his car, as if he's being quite put out by the whole experience. The nerve of those cops. This is ruining his evening. But best of all is the gun hoarder. Given the ability of modern ballistics to link a firearm to a crime scene, information that is common knowledge to anyone who has ever watched even half an episode of Law and Order, you'd think it'd be a no-brainer that if a criminal commits a violent crime with a gun, they'd ditch it as soon as possible, drop it in a river, or disassemble the pieces and scatter them around town. Not so. A fair number of street criminals operate on a narrow profit margin. They aren't exactly knocking over the Bellagio, so their take tends to be small, which means they can't afford to get rid of their gun and pick up a new one. And if the violent crime they committed was against a gang rival, they're going to need that gun to defend themselves against likely retaliation. So the gun stays in circulation. And by circulation, I mean it stays tucked in their pants or stored at their house, because there isn't anywhere else they can put it where it won't be stolen, with there being no honor among thieves and all. So you write the search warrant, hit the house, and there the gun is in the top dresser drawer. And when you tie the gun back to the crime in question, you know that you have been successful because your suspect is poor, dumb, and desperate. These three salient qualities have helped police officers put away a staggering number of violent felons. One of the long-standing interactions law enforcement enjoys with street criminals is the name game. In this contest, crooks try to sell you on an alias because they have warrants under their actual name. The consequence for unlawful lying to the police about your name is a low-level misdemeanor, so some crooks figure it's worth it. But they're inclined to take just one stab at it. They'll verbally serve up a name and date of birth. "I'm sorry, I left my ID at home, officer." And you run it. You quickly figure it's bogus info when nothing comes back in the system for this ghost man, or if there is a match, the height and weight are way off. You are also aided by the fact that these days, nearly every squad car is equipped with a computer program that can display mug shots or photographs of state IDs. When you call them out, 95% of the time, they'll give you their real name. The remaining 5% will apologize for lying and then try to pass off a second fake name, as if maybe you won't try to verify this one because you got that nice apology just a minute ago. And when this second name turns out to be a non-starter, 99% of the 5% will know the gig is up and cough up their birth name, or just clam up, at which point you take them to the station to verify their ID through fingerprints. Once in a great while, you'll have some undaunted felon shoot for 3 different names, the hallowed trifecta. After the first 2 swings and misses, they'll often say something like, "Okay, you guys just make me really nervous. My real name is, I swear I'm telling you the truth." Maybe they're thinking, if I can pull this one off, I will become a legend of the streets. One of my favorite name game stories was the fellow who tried 2 different monikers with some SF cops, the second of which was Roger Hawkins, name changed to shield his reputation. When the second name didn't match, the cops pressed him on his real identity. "I'm going to stick with Roger Hawkins," he said. At some level, you must admire a man who is willing to go down with the ship. Kidnappings are rare and often domestic violence related. Stranger kidnappings are rarer still. Why? Because they are among the most labor-intensive of crimes. First, the kidnappers have the challenge of removing the victim from their home or a public place without getting caught. Then they have to transport them from point A to point B. The victim has to be watched, possibly fed, and kept quiet in a remote location where no one will notice. It takes patience, manpower, and planning, and there are too many opportunities for things to go all sorts of wrong. Your average criminal doesn't want to mess with that. Give them a grab-and-go street rip any day. What's more, enough kidnappings are hoaxes that you must be constantly on guard for them. Victims claim they were taken by force, but their story starts to unravel. Maybe they are surprisingly clean for someone who was allegedly abandoned in the woods for days. Or they report they were tightly bound by their captors, but there are no corresponding ligature marks on their wrists. Or they are found safe and immediately retain an attorney, not a typical move for a true victim. So why would someone make a false claim of abduction? It could be drug or prostitution related. Or sometimes it's a college student with a misguided need for attention. See the Audrey Seiler case in Madison, Wisconsin. Or a boyfriend/girlfriend team hoping to squeeze a parent for ransom money. See the Hackensack, New Jersey case from May of 2014. Or it could be just some dopey kid who stayed out too late and now fears the wrath of his parents for busting curfew. The reasons are often spectacularly inane. These hoaxes poison the well for legitimate kidnapping victims, and local, state, and federal resources invested in working a kidnapping can reach upward of $100 grand. As such, some of these alleged victims are criminally charged for obstruction or filing a false police report. The victim says she faked her own kidnapping because she needs time away. Need time away? The police can arrange that. But one need look no further than the 2015 Denise Huskins kidnapping in Vallejo, California, to realize that some abduction accounts, however questionable they initially appear, turn out to be wholly true. The Huskins case featured, among other things, a boyfriend witness with an incredible tale of drugging and blindfolding, a several-hour delay in reporting, an unlikely ransom amount, $8,500. The victim being dropped off at an illogical spot, her family's home some 400 miles away. The victim initially agreeing to meet with police, but then not showing and hiring an attorney. These are all red flags, classic signs of a ruse, and the Vallejo Police Department, after working the case round the clock with some 40 detectives, said as much publicly. And what spun this case even more into the realm of the fantastic was when the alleged suspect contacted the media to defend the victim and report that the victim's account of her kidnapping was accurate. But after a similar offense occurred in a neighboring jurisdiction, an arrest was made of one Matthew Muller, a disbarred attorney and former Marine, who claimed to be bipolar. He confessed to the crime and has been indicted on kidnapping charges, with the possibility of life in prison. I don't possess any inside knowledge on the Huskins case, and I seek neither to vilify nor to exonerate the Vallejo investigating officers. From what I have gathered, my guess is I'd have arrived at the exact same conclusion they did, namely, that this was one giant make-em-up. It's a conclusion steeped in hard-earned experience, a conclusion that was entirely understandable and entirely false. And it leaves victims like Denise Huskins with that awful fear, the stuff nightmares are made of. Something horrible happened to me, the worst thing that has ever happened to me in my entire life. I'm trying to tell people, and no one believes me. Street crime pisses you off, especially if the victim is an innocent. And generally speaking, anger doesn't help you much as a cop. All it tends to do is get you in trouble. But sometimes a little justified anger is just what this town needs, because anger spurs on effort. So you hit the block one more time in search of the suspect, and that's when you find him. You listen to jail call after jail call, and finally catch him slipping with an offhand but incriminating statement. You write a warrant for his house, his phone, his car. You call the shopkeeper who might have video of the crime, but he doesn't call you back, so you keep calling, and you stop by his store and stay on him like a telemarketer from hell until you get your hands on that crystal-clear surveillance shot of the suspect punching a senior citizen in the teeth and yanking her rent money away as she collapses to the ground like a puppet with cut strings. And if you can't get the suspect for the crime you know he committed but can't quite prove, you figure something else out. Like a parole search that turns up the drugs he's packaged for sale inside the storage unit he rents. Or a traffic stop that reveals his 9mm underneath the driver's seat. Follow those train tracks long enough, eventually you see the train. And if he tries to make a deal to trade up for bigger fish, you let him know he's the only fish you want. He's your special project. You're gonna bird dog him. Today is Johnny Felon Day, and tomorrow will be too, and the day after, until you send him to state prison where he is meant to be. You do these things because you're a cop and it's the very essence of your job. And you do them because your operating philosophy hails from the Latin reliqua autem impius non est. No rest for the wicked.
And that was Chapter 5 of Policecraft by Adam Plantinga. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you to be honest, smart, and beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.